Okay, everyone, welcome to class. Today is the second day of our lecture about the Gilded Age. And so yesterday we talked about how the Gilded Age is a period of great industrial innovation in industry. And two of the biggest inventors of the Gilded Age are Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla. We talked about them a little bit yesterday. Essentially, they both had different methods for transmitting electricity. Thomas Edison invented direct current electricity transmission, and Nikola Tesla, he pioneered alternating current. Today, we use both types, but for a period of time, it was like a competing two different major electricity companies. It was kind of an either or instead of an and kind of question. Eventually, alternating current won out, and alternating current and the electric motors that Nikola Tesla created, we still use today all the time. But direct current is still useful, and in fact, we use it on a regular basis as well. Okay, most things that we actually do that involve electricity use both in a weird way. Like alternating current is typically the delivery system, and then direct current is usually the thing like the battery or the thing right where it happens. Moving on from the electricity boys, we learned a lot about their arguments and their fights, and they got really mean and personal. Nikola Tesla, he ended up becoming like a recluse towards the end of his life, and he even pioneered ways of transferring electricity without wires, and he created these things called Tesla coils, but ultimately his more outlandish ideas never really came to fruition. He was really brilliant though, and perhaps if he had lived longer, or perhaps people paid more attention to him, we might not have wires moving our electricity around. We might just have electricity transferred through the air. That was kind of like his idea. And he had some progress towards it.
Wouldn't that kill us?
Yeah, what if you touch something metal?
Well, so the way it worked, it's and I don't understand it all, okay, but he was working on the Tesla coils, things that would transmit electricity without wires, and he had this plan for the whole world to have electricity without any need for any wires or plugs or any of that stuff. I don't know if that would have worked or not, but it was and I don't understand enough to do it justice. I'm probably telling you this all wrong, but you can research it, look it up for yourself. It's pretty interesting stuff. Thomas Edison, though, for him, electricity was only one of the many things that he did, okay? He invented the light bulb, he invented early cameras or movie cameras, he invented early sound recording equipment. He also invented his own version of the telephone, but Alexander Graham Bell was first. So Graham Bell is the one that gets the credit for it. And along with lots of other inventions, okay, that there's almost too many for us to really list at one point. But he filed for lots and lots of patents. He basically had an invention factory, and he's a businessman. He's always trying to make money off these inventions. Whereas Nikola Tesla, he's kind of like the visionary, I'm just a scientist, but he also needs money. So Nikola Tesla actually partners up with a guy named George Westinghouse to run the business part of his electricity company. But over time, the differences become less and less important because we use both of them even today. All right, but let's talk about communication. Communication technology continues to develop and grow during the Gilded Age, okay? The telegraph was a very important invention that came back way before the Gilded Age. Samuel Morse invented Morse code, and we've talked about the telegraph before, but one of the limitations of the telegraph is it can only send one message at one time on one wire. Okay, and so if more than one person tried to send a message on one wire, it wouldn't work. It would interfere with each other. And you could only send little beeps and pops of dashes. You couldn't really send sound. All right. So there was a demand for something called a multiple telegraph, a telegraph wire that could send more than one message at a time. Okay, and there were lots of people working on this. One of the people working on it was a guy named Alexander Graham Bell. Alexander Graham Bell, he kind of had an interesting background that made him uniquely positioned to work with communication technology. he was a big fan of like electricity and electrical stuff. He was like, that was like the computers of the day, the exciting new world of electricity when he was a kid. And he was also, though, from a family which had deaf people in it. And so he was not deaf, but I believe his mother was deaf, and he was able to do sign language, and he worked with deaf people. He was a tutor for deaf people and like teaching them how to read lips and to talk, even though they were deaf. Because see, deaf people, a lot of times they can talk, but they don't sound like a normal person without that has hearing, because like they can't hear themselves talk, so they can't get like the feedback right. And so sometimes they can make the sounds, but it doesn't quite work. Well, Alexander Graham Bell, he had spent a lot of time working with deaf people, and he would use this device that could record people's sound, but without actually being able to play it back. Like there was right at the beginning, they figured out a way to like etch a sound, like, like how if you look at, say, an audio bar, it like goes up and down. Like they could do that and look at like the loudness of a sound before they could actually play the sound back. So like he had one of those machines, and he would use it to like teach his students. And anyway, so he like had experimented with this stuff. Anyways, let me look up the name of his wife real quick before I tell you her name wrong. But it's a really interesting story how all this comes about. Okay, so bear with me. But Alexander Graham Bell, he is a tutor. He is teaching deaf people how to talk. Okay, and at the same time, on his own time, he's like constantly working on electricity stuff. Okay, all right. So yes. So anyways, there's this there's one of his students is this lady named Mabel Hubbard. Okay, and Alexander Graham Bell, he's poor, he's barely scraping by, but he tutors these people that are really rich, because like not everybody who's deaf can afford like tutoring to learn how to talk. So it's usually like rich people who send like their kids to get tutored because they're deaf. Well, one of the students that he tutors is this, is an older girl. She's like a late teenager, and he's a young man. Anyways, her name is Mabel Hubbard. Okay, and so Mabel Hubbard, she's like, she's a student, and they're students for years. Anyway, she falls in love with Alexander Graham Bell. And, and they're like close in age. It's not like, don't worry. It's not acting. But they invited him, because it's like a private tutor. They invited him to their house to like a dinner party. And Alexander Graham Bell, he's like shy. He's like, kind of a recluse. He's like the guy, like, the meme where there's like the guy sitting at the party. He's like, nobody knows that I'm cool or whatever. Like at the party, he's like, nobody, he doesn't really know what to say or what to do because he's just awkward. But he knows all this stuff about like electricity and about sound. So anyways, they have a piano, and he starts playing on the piano, and then he feels more comfortable, and he like starts showing them stuff like, look what I can do with this piano with like sound. And he like starts doing little like parlor tricks with the piano, like singing on the strings on the piano, and makes resonant chords. Anyways, he's talking. And anyways, he tells them about these little projects that he's working on. And one of the projects that he was working on was a way to use sound through a telegraph wire. Not to do a phone call. That wasn't what he did at first, but rather using different tones of sound on one wire to send multiple different messages on one telegraph wire at a time. Well, anyways, Mabel Hubbard's father, I think it's like Charles Hubbard, okay, may have his first name wrong, but he was a businessman. And he was like, his business was failing, and he needed like a new invention. And he like realized like, this could be the way I can make a lot of money. So instead of being his daughter's like deafness tutor, he hires Alexander Graham Bell, gives him some money for research, and says, make me a harmonic telegraph. So like a telegraph can send multiple messages at once. So like Alexander Graham Bell decides to take the job. Number one, he needs money. Number two, he wants to spend time with Mabel. And so he's working on it, and then he gets his buddy, his name is Watson. Anyways, and they're working on the harmonic telegraph, and it's hard. It's like tricky. They can't figure it out. But accidentally, they discover how to transmit sound over a wire. Okay? And so Alexander Graham Bell, there's all this drama, like we're not gonna get all the names. He tries to tell Mr. Hubbard, he's like, I have this idea for a speaking telegraph. And Hubbard's like, no, that's nonsense. I want the harmonic telegraph. And like, it's a big fight. And anyways, eventually, Alexander Graham Bell finally just says, he's like nervous, whatever, but him and Mabel fall in love. And Mabel's like, listen, they've grown up. He's like, listen, let's just get married and we'll be able to do whatever, we don't have to listen to father anymore, but they need his money. So anyways, they like go to Mr. Hubbard, they ask to get married. Hubbard says, oh, you can only marry my daughter if you make a harmonic telegraph. And so like Alexander Graham Bell, he's like working like night and day to invent this stupid telegraph thing because he wants to marry Mabel. Eventually, like the harmonic telegraph like doesn't even really work, okay? Like there's a better way to do a multiple telegraph. But Alexander Graham Bell invents the telephone kind of by accident, and that's what ends up getting him famous, making him lots of money. Him and Mabel get married. They fight with Thomas Edison over patents, and they win, and then they live happily ever after. Anyways, yes, you may. So Alexander Graham Bell invents the first telephone, and like the first words that he actually says over the telephone are on accident. It's like, so he's working on the telephone. Him and his partner, Mr. Watson, they're like in separate rooms. They're trying to set up the telephone, but Alexander Graham Bell accidentally spills like acid on his leg because they're in like the workshop and it's dirty and there's like some acid that gets thrown, and he's like, Watson, I need you, because he's like his legs are burning, and Watson comes in, he's like, the telephone worked, and he's like, there's acid on my leg. But anyway, they figure out the telephone, and that immediately changes the world. Okay, once the telephone becomes popular, once Alexander Graham Bell shows it off, once it starts to become a popular thing and people start using it, there are telephone lines strung all across the country. Now, originally, telephone lines were just one-to-one, okay? So like this room to that room, one city to another city, one line at a time, okay? And so like the early owners of telephones were usually like businesses that would have like different branches in different cities, and they would have like one phone in like Chicago, one phone in New York, so like the New York and Chicago office could talk to each other. But over time, they start developing like switchboards where you plug in your phone and it goes to like one hub, like say the town switchboard, and you talk to the operator and you say, the operator says, operator, how can I connect you? You say, dial me up or connect me with so-and-so on Fifth Avenue. And so they would actually manually take your cords and like plug them in to like connect them.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what they did for that. Eventually they figure out how to like dial phones so they can do it themselves. But like, it was like, you ever looked at like speakers like plugged into like a mix board, and you have like the tape player and the speaker, and you have to like plug it in. Like imagine that, but like instead of changing speakers, you're like, I want to talk to Mr. Brown on 2nd Street, and so you like click it up, okay? So that's kind of how it would work, and it very quickly revolutionizes the whole country because with telephone, communication is so much more efficient, okay? If you've ever had the issue of deciphering a text to determine if it was a mean text or a happy text, what did they mean by okay? Okay with the period, okay, okay-ay, or just okay? Like, what does that mean? You ever had those situations where like, what do they mean by text? That's because in text messaging, you lose all the richness and emotional sort of subtlety in the human voice, You can't really put sarcasm or jokes as easily in text. And so with the telegraph, you only got text, and so it was less effective for communicating. Also, with telegraph, you had to sit there and like decipher it, like send there, send back. With the telephone, you can have a full conversation back and forth, back and forth. It revolutionized the country, and we see more and more businesses becoming more efficient. Telephones and telegraphs become more and more advanced throughout the Gilded Age, and the country becomes more and more connected. We start to see telegraph and telephone wires across the country, and so people are able to do business across the whole country instantaneously, okay? You don't have to wait for a letter carrier to carry your message all the way across the country. You don't even have to wait for a telegraph operator to translate the message and send it back. But if you've got a bank in New York and a bank in San Francisco and you've got an issue, you just pick up the phone and you hash it out right then, which is incredibly transformative and leads to much more efficiency in the whole country about a whole economy, okay? It allows for people in, say, Kansas to call to New York to arrange for a loan with the bank, okay? It allows for people in New York to place an order in Colorado for iron ore to be sent to Pittsburgh for their steel company. And so you start to see bigger and bigger companies with lots and lots of further reach. You see larger and larger corporations. And fueling a lot of this, oh wait, I need to tell you about the telephone. There's one more thing about telephone, okay? Telephone changes like the culture as well, okay? Like the telephones are part of why we say hello to each other. That was Thomas Edison's idea. See, hello was like an archaic greeting that people didn't always say. It was just, it was occasional. But when you pick up a phone, what are you supposed to say? Well, Alexander Graham Bell wanted people to say ahoy. And so like people who got Alexander Graham Bell phones, they would like get like instructions to be like, when you pick up, you say ahoy. But that didn't catch on. Thomas Edison, for a little while, before they had to fight it out in court until finally the court said that Graham Bell had the patent for phones. But while they were still like disputing the patent, Thomas Edison's phone company, they wanted people to say hello. And so hello became more popular than ahoy. Imagine we just went around and said ahoy, matey, it's kind of weird. But Alexander Graham Bell, eventually his company becomes like the Alexander Graham Bell Telephone Company, and eventually it becomes AT&T. AT&T was Alexander Graham Bell's company. It's like they've changed the name, but that's his company. Anyways, we're going to take a quick pause for culture. Before we get into railroads, we're going to talk about culture and how the country is changing. During Thomas Edison's life, he invents the first movie cameras, some of the first movie cameras, but people went and had entertainment in cities in ways that are similar and different to the way we do today, okay? Cities are popping up all across the country. People are living in cities and working in factories in cities. And as people move to the city, the pace of life changes, okay? Out in the country, you're constantly working, but you're not on the clock. You get up with the sun, you go to bed with the sun, there's always something to do on the farm. But when you live in a city and work in a factory, you work for 8 hours, then you're done, or 12 hours, more likely at this point. But you have this thing called off time, okay, time off. And what do you do on your time off? A lot of times people find ways to have entertainment. During the Gilded Age is when we see the growth of mass entertainment. I don't know if I have a good slide for mass entertainment, but we're going to talk about it right now, because I feel like it's appropriate once we talk about the telephone, okay? You start to see mass entertainment, okay? This is before radios and before movies. The way people had fun differed from place to place, okay? This is when we see like the first football teams, baseball teams, professional sports teams organized, and going to spectator sports becomes a thing, not going to like play baseball, but to watch other people play baseball. That becomes very popular during the Gilded Age as a way to spend time. Another way to spend time was to go to something called a vaudeville show. Now, a vaudeville show was a lot like going to the theater today, but it wasn't like going to the theater and watching one play, okay? Like today, when people go to like the theater, they usually go to see one play and then they leave. But a vaudeville show was more of like a variety show, like watching like Saturday Night Live or like Jimmy Fallon's show or whatever, where there's like lots of different things that happen in one show. That's what a vaudeville show was like. So with a vaudeville show, you'd have like a master of ceremonies. He'd come out and he'd greet people. He'd tell them some jokes, have a little bit of fun. And then after they had a little bit of fun and told some jokes, then they'd have maybe like a musical number. Or maybe they'd have a magician, or maybe they'd have a comedy act, or maybe they'd have a drama. And there'd be lots of different things that would happen throughout the vaudeville show. And you would spend like hours there, having entertainment there. So that was like a way to spend the evening, okay? Anyways, telephones quickly enter into the cultural consciousness of Americans. and people are talking about it. It changes people's lives, and they even write songs about the telephone. Okay, so what I'm about to show you are two examples of a song, one of the very first recorded songs ever. Okay, because Thomas Edison and others, they figure out ways to record sound and play it back later. We start to see early records and like people listening to music on their own time. And one of the very first songs ever recorded is this song called Telephone. Okay, it's about telephones. Real quick, let me. Okay, this is Arthur Collins, 1899, and I guess we'll learn about Subros real quick. But this is the 1899 telephone song. Okay. Okay. This is what, 122-year-old recording the qualities of the best. But this is using long distance relationships. Send me a kiss by wire. Wasn't there like some recent song like Kiss Me Through the Phone or something? People are the same. They just have better choice. Wait, I don't know what this is. Let's just, the cheese. Okay, look. Let me look up Arthur Collins. Arthur Collins, telephone, lyrics. Let's just look at the lyrics real quick. Okay. Now, when we look at this song, I've got a little baby, but she's out of sight. I talk to her across the telephone. I've never seen my honey, but she's mine all right. So take my tip and leave this girl alone. Every single morning you'll hear me yell, "Hey, Central, fix me up along the line." Again, you have to like call the operator and say, "Hey, connect me." Okay. He connects me with my honey, then I rings the bell, and this is what I say to baby mine. Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Hello, my ragtime gal. Ragtime was the type of music popular at this period. That's like the music you were just listening to is ragtime. It's very similar to jazz, or it's like a predecessor to jazz is ragtime, okay? So it's like an early form of jazz. Send me a kiss by wire, baby, my heart's on fire. If you refuse me, honey, you'll lose me, then you'll be left alone. Oh, baby, telephone, tell me I'm your own. Okay, anyways, and it's kind of interesting. You see things happen in like the culture. Telephones become things that we talk about all the time, and they just have entered into just our life. okay? But it was a new and exciting thing, and people were like, making songs about it. Now, here's the thing. Is that recording, we're going to get deep real quick. Is that recording actually what it was like back then? When we're historians, we're always trying to feel like what the past was like. And we finally gotten to the part of history where we actually have like video and sound recordings from the past. But are those accurate? What do y'all think? You think so? You think it sounded just like that?
Because it was like news.
Why would somebody edit that? Why would
Good,
somebody
so
do
that, but what Sandra was saying was it's like the quality, right? A better quality camera can take a better picture, right? A better quality microphone can pick up a better sound. Have you ever had a picture taken of yourself and it didn't look like you? Or you ever heard yourself record and doesn't feel like you, or seen something recorded? It's like not quite the same as being there, right? Some people have taken this song that we just listened to and have reimagined it, not trying to necessarily change it, but rather to be like, what did it feel like to be at a vaudeville show and hear someone sing it? So what we're about to watch, we're going to talk a little bit about how we remember history real quick, okay? So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you a different clip of the same song, but actually made in a video game, okay? Now, before you freak out, okay? This is like trying to be a historical recreation, okay? It's a work of fiction, but it's set in like the same year, 1899, okay? So this song came out in 1899. So this is like trying to recreate the world of what it was like. What did it feel like? What did the clothes look like? So this is in many ways like a historical reenactment, okay? So we're gonna take a moment and we're gonna try to listen to it without all the tinny boxiness, like what it might have sounded like if you were actually there and actually listen to people playing the music without all the garblediness of like the early sound recording.
Is it in Fallout Shelter?
No.
What songs are in Fallout?
A lot of the songs in Fallout are from like the jazz era of like the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. But this is actually, you might be able to figure this one out. Okay, it'll probably say it. Well, no, this is the one that, no, this is not the video game. I want to show you the one of the video game. This is a different one. So this is from a vaudeville show. This is a recreation of a vaudeville show, okay? All right, there was the master of ceremonies. So you like to think about it, you're in a dark room, smoke-filled audience, okay? Right, now, there's the little vaudeville act. They come out, they're gonna sing, they're gonna talk, okay? So this is from a video game, but it's trying to be like history, okay? And it's actually a really good recreation of the sound.
So-called modern improvement you may have become aware of called the telephone. This new machine will carry a facsimile of your voice from Blackwater to Valentine to San Johnny, and they propose to distribute them to all manner of places, so that no matter where you are, somebody is looking for you. A wise man prays that one day we may all eventually be gathered together in a heaven of everlasting rest and peace and bliss, except for the inventor of the telephone, because someone is always calling, saying, hello, hello. I got a little baby, but he's not outside. I talked to him in the telephone. I can't see my honey, but he's not all right. This gal just can't leave a man alone. Every single morning you will hear me yell. He sends a pixie up the lonely side, so he can let me with my honey and I'll ring the bell. And this is what I say to baby mine. Hello, my baby. Hello, my
So in a vaudeville show, crowd participation is welcomed. This is not like a formal theater. This is like you know, average, ordinary folk coming in after work, might be drunk, might be having too good of a time. But this is ragtime music. Yeah, this is kind of like what it would look like. You'd be in a theater, you know, and there would be different acts. And so this game actually does a really good job of recreating a vaudeville show. We're not going to watch the whole thing, but like they see a lot of different like acts and different people that come in too. So this is like a modern recreation of history, which we may look at and say, well, this is fake. And yes, it is. But so is every time we talk about the past. Every time we talk about the past, we are reinterpreting it, and we're talking about it with our own modern perceptions and conventions. And even when we watch a video from the past, there are filters that we have to go through to technology and to our own perception. It's really impossible to go back to the past, but it may not be perfect, but getting close, you can have a better idea of maybe what it was like to be in a place like this. And so like this is a higher quality sound, but obviously a work of fiction. And then later on in the 50s, they like re-recorded it with the quartet. This is the more famous version of it that most people are familiar with this. This is like the 1950s interpretation of it. This is the one that you've probably heard on TikTok. But it actually comes from 1899. And you'll be left alone, oh baby, telephone, and tell me you're my own. So anyways, that's enough of that. So anyways, telephones, they're fun. But kind of got a little bit of a historical quandary there, you know. Historians, what we do is we try to go back to the past. We're trying to time travel constantly. You know, whether it's through a book, which is a filtered view of the past. You don't get the full experience of what it was like to be in the past by reading a book. You can get some semblance of an idea. And you don't get a full experience of what the past was like by watching a movie or playing a game, because obviously that's filtered and made by modern people in their works of fiction. Okay, until you invent the time machine, you're not going to be able to go back. But as historians, our goal is to try to get close. We're never going to get there, but we're going to try to get close and try to give people some sense of what these people's lives were like, what they went through, and how that has affected us and what it means. Okay? All right. One way that it has affected you, the Gilded Age, is through the revolution in transportation that was the railroad industry. The railroad industry had been developing for a while, but after the Civil War, it jump starts and takes off and grows tremendously. This is a map of railroads in the United States in the year 1860. So the red lines are the railroads. Just looking at this map, where do you think most people live? Northeast. There's a little tiny baby railroad in California, a few in Texas, but not that many, okay? All right? These railroads, there's nothing really connecting the Great Plains. And we talked about this last week when we talked about the wars for the West. As settlers moved west after the Civil War, a lot of this gets settled. But right before the Civil War, a lot of this is pretty well under the control of Native Americans and not settled very much by the people of the United States. This is 1870. The Transcontinental Railroad, 1869, that's connected right here at Promontory Point, Utah. That's where President Ulysses S. Grant drives the golden spike into the railroad and connects the country by rail. This instantly changes everything, okay? Instead of having to take days or weeks to get across the country, you can go in just a couple of days, okay? All right, instead of having to sail for months around South America, you can just drive right across on the railroad. And this allows the country to be connected. When you pair this with revolutions in communication like telegraph and telephone, with revolutions in transportation, we see an incredibly interconnected interstate economy. Okay, instead of just doing business with the people that live around you, now you can do business all across the country, all across the world. You can get the Sears catalog, okay, the catalog of items for sale from, you know, a big company like Sears, and you can be in Nebraska and send your money order through Western Union, another kind of communication, transportation company, all sorts of wrapped together. Western Union actually tried to have their own telephones, and that was the one for Thomas Edison. Anyways, they lost the lawsuit, and so they became money transfer people. It's like, you know, you get on Western Union, you send your money off, you send your money order off to Sears, and they'd send you back a pair of boots, you know, in a few weeks, okay? Which may seem like today that's a long time. You know, we're used to like Amazon shipping in 2 days or whatever. But at the time in the 1870s, having something like a railroad that can deliver you something that you order in a month is like revolutionary. Okay, you order it and a month or two later it comes in. That's awesome. Okay, it gives you access to things that you just simply wouldn't have otherwise. 1880. 10 years later, there's even more and more railroads, other transcontinental routes are put through, and we see more and more transportation. What's going on here is that we start to see a connected and specialized economy where the West becomes a source of resources, okay? Resources from mines, resources from farms and from ranches, food, raw materials, lumber, you know, brass, iron ore, gold, silver, etc. These things are extracted and then shipped over to the East in the factories. They manufacture them into finished goods, which are then bought by the farmers and ranchers and miners in the West. And you see this transfer back and forth, okay? All right, let's look at another one. 1890, okay? Pretty well by 1890, the whole country is connected. Yes, there's less railroads in the West, but there's enough lines coming through to get most people connected. Now you'll notice that even still, the South is still lagging behind the North. And we talked about that over the last couple of weeks, reasons why the South is lagging behind. But railroads, they are part of a huge economic enterprise to grow the country and to transform the country from a rural society to an industrial society. Okay, you have all these railroads. Those are all places where there's cities and lots of people living. Yes, sir. All right. Moving on. But where does all this progress come from? Well, a lot of it comes from an entity called a corporation. Okay? A corporation, to put it simply, is a legal entity that is not a person, but is a person and can make money. Okay? Let me explain it a little bit more thoroughly. So legally, under the law, a corporation acts like a person. It can sign contracts. It can own money. It can own things. It can pay people. It can receive money. It pays taxes. It can get into a lawsuit. It can sue other people. It can commit crimes. But it is not a person. It is a thing that people create. Corporations are created for people to share their money. Okay? All right, so we're going to start a business. Okay, let's say you're going to start a business. Mr. Brown, you're going to start a business. You're going to sell cookies. Okay? Selling cookies, if you start your own Mr. Brown's Bakery, okay, and you bake 100 cookies every day, you sell them for $1, you make $100 every day, you are a sole proprietor of Mr. Brown's cookie business. Okay, Mr. Brown's Bakery. Okay, a sole proprietor of a business is a small business owned and operated by one person. And so if your business gets in trouble, that's you getting in trouble. But you only have your money, right? If you want to buy another oven, you got to go to the bank and get a loan in your name, right? But let's say that Mr. Brown, you decide to form a partnership with Mr. Lovelady, and you form Brown and Loveladies Bakery. Okay, and y'all start baking cookies together. That's a partnership where it's shared, and both of you put together your money, and that is another type of business. However, again, you both are legally liable for what happens in the business. If your business runs out of money and you get into debt, it's the debt that you have to pay personally that cuts into your own personal income, your own personal finances. When you incorporate a company, though, you divest yourself from all of that liability and you create a corporation that is different and separate from you. Okay, so Mr. Brown, let's say that you decide to create Brown's Bakery Incorporated. So now you incorporate your company, you get a charter from the government, and the government allows you to incorporate your business. And now Brown's Bakery Incorporated is no longer tied directly to you, but it is its own separate entity. And you are an employee for that company. As the manager, you're an employee, and you're also a stockholder. When a company becomes incorporated, it creates something called stock, okay? Stock is a share of ownership of a company. So let's value Brown's Bakery at $10,000, okay? It's a $10,000 bakery. Now, Mr. Brown, he needed the funds. He only had about $3,000 worth of stocks or investments. So we're going to put this at $10,000 of value. And we're going to say that it's 1,000 stocks. Okay, we're going to make 1,000 stocks. And so each stock is going to be worth stock of one stock equals $10. Okay. All right, so that's your corporation. So you have $3,000, so you bought 300 stocks. Okay, so you have 30% of the ownership of a company, but it is not you. If this company gets into debt and it gets in trouble, it's not you getting in trouble. Does that make sense? If this company gets in a contract with someone, it's not Mr. Brown's contract, it's the company's contract, separate. Okay, and this is really helpful to create really big companies because when you want to make a big factory, you need lots of people to pool their resources together. So now we have Mr. Lovelady, he's bought 2,000. So he's 20% owner, okay? And then we've got Mr. Brown at 3,000. And we'll say Miss Tran, she's bought 1,000, okay? And where are we at? 6. And then we'll have Miss Corona, you'll have 2,000. And then the other Miss Corona will have 2,000, okay? All right, we'll pick up there tomorrow. I'm going to teach you about stocks tomorrow, okay? Don't buy any GameStop stocks, just so you know, okay? All right. We'll learn about business tomorrow, hopefully. Y'all have a good day. Do good things, be good people, make good choices.